Welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Atoma Eji. I'm very excited to have with us today Damon and Ivy Brog from Appleton, Wisconsin. They lead the Fox Valley Church of Christ. Again, welcome to the program. So glad you guys were able to make some time to join us.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for inviting us.
Sure. So I know we've had a few conversations over Facebook, myself and Ivy. And even though this is a new COVID age where we can't necessarily do a double date or whatever it may be, we definitely are getting to know each other through the new interwebs and the new communication that's out there. So I wanted to just share with, I guess, the rest of my audience, just the awesome people that you are, in case you don't already know. So I just have a few questions I wanted to ask you. I guess the first one is, can you please share about how God brought you into the kingdom? So you can kind of both share.
Yeah, I'll lead off, I think.
Yeah.
So I had a fairly spiritual upbringing. Mom was always very God aware, and she didn't commit us to any specific denomination. We sampled quite a few things, and then when I left high school, joined the military, I was kind of a spiritual free agent. And I ended up in the first Gulf War back in 1991. I took a Bible out there with me, really more as a lucky charm or a keepsake. I don't think I ever had any intentions on reading it. I shoved it underneath the seat of my Humvee and hoped that it would somehow keep me from blowing up. That was about the extent of my purpose for the Bible at that stage of my life. There was a man from our unit who was killed in action, and
Was he the first casualty?
He was, I don't know if he was the first casualty, but one of the very first ground casualties in the conflict. But long story, it could be a long story, so I'll try to keep it abridged. His death made me wonder about the finality of life, and while I was only 19 at the time, it made me aware that I may not make it home, just like he didn't make it home. And so then I said, where's that Bible? And I grabbed underneath my seat, and I just had this burning question. I wanted to know, where do I stand with God? If I were to suffer a similar fate, would I be okay? So I did what you do with most books. I just started on page 1, and I started reading. And about 5 chapters in, this was a Shakespearean, old English King James type of Bible. By about chapter 5, I was lost. I didn't know what to make of it, so I closed it up. I just looked out into the clear night sky, and I can remember this really vividly. I just asked God, what do you want me to do? I just want to know where I stand with you. What do you want me to do? So the very next day, we went out to our fighting position in the desert. We weren't near a town. We were just protecting an asset. So we got off of the road and then drove for 40 minutes just into the sand. So we were nowhere. We were nowhere, right? In a Muslim country. The day after I had said this prayer. Across the horizon, there's a dust cloud that kicks up. A Jeep is going across the horizon. He stops going across. He starts to come toward us. So we don't know if he's friendly or not. We're in the midst of a combat. So we raise weapons and track him as he's getting closer. He doesn't appear to be hostile, but we're ready in case he is. He stops his vehicle. He gets out maybe 50, 75 yards away and puts his hands in the air. And in one of his hands, he's holding what appears to be a book. He walks up to our Humvee. He doesn't say much. He just hands me a Bible.
Wow.
And says, here you go. Turns around and leaves no further words. The Bible he handed me was kind of like the Message version is now, but in the early 90s version of it, I think it was called the Good News Bible. It was just very plain vernacular. Mm-hmm. So I started reading that. This time, for whatever reason, I decided to start in the New Testament. So I started at page 1 in Matthew there. And I had my answer by the time I hit about page 7. I knew where I stood with God. So I got back stateside, began to search for a church, one like I saw in the Bible. By the time I had gotten home from the Middle East, I had already read the New Testament and now circled back and read a bunch of the Old. And within the first 3 weeks of my first semester of college, I was reached out to by 3 different disciples who asked me to come out to their devotional or to a Sunday service. And as soon as I walked in on a Sunday morning, it was amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
I
awesome.
was baptized in October of 1991.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I can't beat that.
No, you don't have to.
For me, I went into the military right out of high school and met my first husband. Ended up in Louisville, Kentucky, but felt very alone and isolated. Had some really difficult situations come up, I think, that just pressed me to desperation. And I think because I didn't really get raised with, what Damon referred to, just a kind of a God-fearing, awareness, an awareness of God. I think I was always aware that God was there, but didn't really know what vessel to to dedicate myself to. So it led me to kind of dibble dabble with just about every known religion on the planet. And so I was just kind of floating in the wind and got pressed up against some really desperate circumstances. And I thought, well, maybe I should just pray. But I didn't really know how to do that either. I knew in movies they lit candles and usually you'd get on your knees. And so, no joke, I lit some candles in my bedroom. I got down on my knees and I just like, I don't even know what to say to you. And I just wept. And I just said, I need to know what you want me to do. And it was within that week, if I'm not mistaken, it was probably a couple of days later at my job. 2 women came in. I worked at a fitness center, and so my job was basically show them around, but really it was to pitch them and try to sell them a membership. And so, we split them up, and I took one, and my coworker took the other, and she was so sweet. She was like, "Oh, no, I'm not interested at all, but do you think you'd be interested in, maybe coming out to church sometime?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And I don't really know why, but to this day, I don't think right away I saw the dots connecting. I did give her my phone number, and she was very persistent. She called me, I think, every week, and I would lie to her, and I would make up excuses, and eventually, I think I realized that this might be an answer to a prayer. I was a little slow on the uptake. So I went out to church the first time, and I'd never seen anything like that. I'd not ever read the book of Acts. I was not familiar with the church in the Bible. But what I saw there in the Louisville Church of Christ was, it was beyond words. I'd never seen people, first of all, hanging out outside of church, setting up time with one another at like ungodly hours, like, "Okay, bro," and they were like, "Okay, sister," and I'm like, what is going on with all of this? But they were getting together really early in the morning, and I was like, this is super weird, but I'm oddly curious. And I feel like I came back week 2 just to see, how much of it was actually real. It's just so dumb. Like, the whole 350 people are faking it just for me on a Sunday morning. I don't know. And I came back and I thought, man, I don't want to be anyplace else. So I started studying the Bible, and 10 days later I got baptized.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think someone once said there's no boring conversion story. And It's not a competition, but everyone has an incredible
This is so true. Yeah.
conversion story. So you guys have been disciples for a number of years. What would you say is your most memorable experience as a disciple? Or some of them, if you want to
Right, right. She
briefly.
she previewed the questions to me, and I said, I can't answer that one. That's too difficult. I've been really impacted by some things. Most of them really great. Some of them profoundly sad and challenging. So I just thought I'd
Yeah.
maybe share one of each. Um,
Here,
I was really impacted by that opportunity to be in the campus ministry in the first several years of my life
Yeah.
as a disciple.
what state was that?
That was in Milwaukee, University of
Okay.
Wisconsin, Milwaukee, go Panthers. But the volume of people that we studied the Bible with was incredible. I mean, you were in studies with seekers probably at a half a dozen times a week. Um, and you were seeing people make their way from the darkness into the light so consistently
Awesome.
that I think it forever shaped and changed the way that I saw what I was here for. What my purpose was. I don't think after that experience I was ever going to be satisfied with not being engaged or involved in helping people become disciples. I caught on early that this was reconciliation with God, and it was ultimately the most important thing that any of us were ever going to have to account for.
Mhm.
And it was so thrilling. And some people, a lot of people, they'll study a bit and then they'll turn away and decide that God is not for them, and that's hard to go through. But
Right.
I would say that early experience being in campus ministry shaped me for the next 25 years that have followed after it. Well, actually, our time in campus ministry was a little longer than that, but
Right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome.
and then there was a profoundly sad one. Our fellowship, probably like the ones that you've been a part of, Otoma, we had a recalibration back in around 2002, 2004, and the fellowship that we were a part of in Milwaukee um, was definitely affected by turmoil, potential for division, um, the church splitting into um, different opinion groups over who should lead and how the leadership should lead, and um, it was a real battle. I saw dear friends and brothers and sisters who had always loved each other before, at least I had thought they did, treating each other in ways that were hard to see, hard to swallow, hard to imagine. I can see now that that was useful training for what I might witness in the future, including the times we're living in today.
Sure.
Um, but that was difficult. I was part of a core group of leaders in Milwaukee at that time who sat down with our lead evangelist and counseled him to resign. And he was one of my best friends. He was there at so many key moments and
Yeah.
memories in my life. And he didn't take it well. And the relationship really struggled after that. Uh, and I had a lot of questions. Am I being disloyal? Am I not doing what's right? Do I need to honor the health of the church above this person who I call a dear friend? If I truly believe that this brother would be better served, maybe not in this leadership capacity. It was a real head scratcher and
Yeah.
made me struggle a lot. Up until then, I had done a lot of kid stuff in the kingdom. And that was really my first put your big boy pants on moment, that I had to not just watch happen, but be a part of, and that was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a mix, I think, in all of our lives, and sometimes one week encompasses really incredible times, but also some incredible challenges. And I think a lot of it is the growth processes, disciples go through, which always prepare us for something in the future. So I appreciate you sharing both aspects there.
Yeah.
Ivy?
I definitely, I felt like him when I read that question. I was like, Ooh, that's kind of a crunchy one because there's so many things. But I would say, similar to Damon, I think I've got one that was just a mountaintop experience and one that was a mountaintop experience in a whole different way. I think I was a 3-year-old disciple, and I was working as an aircraft mechanic, as was my first husband. And our second daughter was born with 6 different heart defects, and so she was recovering from her open heart surgery, her first one. And then he was killed in an aircraft explosion. So I found myself at 22 with a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old. Actually, he passed away on our oldest daughter's 3rd birthday. And so it was just this. It was just a life-shattering event. And I was a fairly young disciple still. But I will say that that time changed the way that I saw church as a family. By that evening, my entire Bible talk group had baked a cake and came over and decorated our house. And because I told them, this is going to be the day that Michael left the earth, but it's always going to be our daughter's birthday. And I felt very strongly that she should still celebrate her birthday, because she had no idea what was going on. And so that night they brought gifts and had this huge birthday party for her, even, at the tail end of this just tragic, sorrowful day. And as I sat back and I just looked at that, I thought, this is my family.
Mm-hmm.
This is my family, that I've been.
Not just people I go to church with.
Yeah. This is what Jesus meant when he reimagined the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that forever changed the way that I saw the kingdom. When I interact with somebody on Facebook, when I'm in a private message, when I go to another church and I befriend someone, this is my sibling. I feel very strongly about that. And I think that's why I'm very passionate about my relationships. I can meet somebody online. I'm like, oh my gosh, my friend, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, wait, your friend. You mean your friend on Facebook? I'm like, how dare you? Because like for me, there's no difference, but I think it's because I was very transformed by, what the kingdom did when they poured themselves out to comfort me and my family. So I think that really changed me a lot. I think the other thing that I experienced in the kingdom was going to Africa for the World Mission Conference, and
95.
that was
That's
just.
Right. That was pretty amazing.
It was. I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, I was still a fairly young disciple. At this point, I think my husband had only been gone for like less than a year. So I was single mom in it, and my roommates had my kids, and I, went to Johannesburg, and, to sit in that auditorium and to hear the voices lifted up. I mean, in that capacity for the first time as a young disciple.
And at that time in history.
Oh, it was.
Were you able to keep up with the dancing?
No.
Nah.
She's great at a lot of things. Dancing, not one of those things.
No. I'll show you sometime. No, just kidding. So I think that is the point in time that I realized that the kingdom was so much bigger than I could have even imagined.
Right.
And I think that carrying that perspective with me has just really helped me to, I think, always have hope that there's something around the corner, there's something else coming, because of what I thought was the kingdom, in my little corner of the world, as I looked through a tiny
bigger.
keyhole.
Yeah.
I got on that plane and went to Africa, and I thought, oh my gosh, I know not. If I kind of feel like Job, you're like, just, curse me in ashes. I know nothing, and that's kind of how I felt at that conference, just absolutely filled with gratitude and blown away to have even be given the opportunity to be in this kingdom. So, yeah.
Yeah, I
Even
remember. Go
it's
ahead.
amazing. We flew out of JFK, and probably 80% of that flight from JFK to Joburg was disciples. We were all on our way to the conference. We had gathered from our different places and just all funneled into that one spot.
Right.
So imagine church on a plane.
Spontaneous church.
That was the flight to South Africa. It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. Probably frustrating for the flight attendants.
It really was. They're like, we need you guys to sit down, and we're all like, this is fellowship time,
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I was actually at that. I wasn't the leader, but I so passionately wanted to go. I just knew there's never going to be another conference in Africa like this. And I
Yeah.
was actually right, unfortunately, but it was an incredible, incredible time. And you're right. I mean, I think that the kingdom is family. And I'm so glad that, you have that tragic, but at the same time, awesome memory, from those times. So you guys have been in the ministry for a number of years. What would you say you love about the ministry?
Yeah, that's
I
also.
think this can inspire other people also
Yeah.
that are thinking about the ministry, while Ivy has a brain freeze there.
No, I don't have brain freeze.
I love so many things about it.
Yeah.
That's what makes this a hard question. But I would say, to narrow it down, with the reconciliation of the human soul
Mhm.
to the Almighty God being, as I alluded to earlier, the paramount thing in life. I mean, that's the one great thing we all have in common, right? We're all children of God, and we're all called to a relationship with Him.
Mhm.
And so to have the opportunity to make the ministry of reconciliation your primary focus in life, the thing that ultimately matters to everybody, gets to be your focus,
Right.
is an incredible honor. And the stories that we could tell because of our opportunity to make that our full-time focus for. We've been married for 23 years. I think we've spent about 18 of those in the full-time ministry. It's just it's good for our family. It's great for our marriage. Those things are true too. But just seeing people's hearts change and seeing people reconcile to God, and that you get to do that all the time.
Right.
So purposeful, very rewarding, very encouraging. Yeah. So that's my favorite.
I agree. That's awesome.
He took my answer.
You'll still find something, I'm sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that is obviously that's the top. I think if I answered differently, then I would say it is the opportunity that is afforded me to seek God in a capacity that I may not be able to do if I was working a full-time job outside of the church. And so the work, the spiritual work in my own heart that needs to be done, the mining process and the grieving process and the rejoicing process and the seeking wisdom process, I think that is just expanded. And I mean, you get compensated for your time in a lot of ways, but it almost feels unfair to be compensated to have a powerful walk with God, But to me, I feel like that's definitely up there. It's one of my favorite things that I can have just, really great time with God, and to take Sabbath time and special dates with God, those things that I may not be able to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little quick one. So how do you guys kind of arrange things just briefly through the week in terms of like a Sabbath, or how do you do things as far as that?
That's a newer development as far as Sabbath is concerned. A few years back, we read a book called Leading on Empty by
Okay.
a man named Wayne Cordiero. We've never met him,
About
but it's a
seven
great
years ago
book.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. And he highly recommended, if you want to make it long term in ministry or in any capacity of spiritual leadership,
Yeah.
you're going to have to put fuel back in the tank, or you
Right.
will end up on empty and broken down or stranded on the side of the road. So
Right.
we actually took our first ever sabbatical this year. Um,
Okay.
we did that for 3 months,
More of an
January
extended sabbatical. Yeah.
through March, and coming out of that, we just pace ourselves differently than we ever did before we went in. So Saturdays now, we don't work. You know, we really just
Right.
don't care what time it is. Um, we spend the time doing things that draw us to God, whether it's
Yeah.
taking a walk around the pond in the neighborhood, or reading more, or worshiping, listening to music,
Right.
um, whatever we want to do. And it helps us on the other 6 days to be a lot more full,
Yeah.
and hard to hard to even explain how different that is, how contrasting that is to the pace that we worked at when we first entered the ministry back in the
Oh
late
my
90s.
goodness.
It's also a faith thing, right? Because that's like, is it Exodus 16 where,
Yeah,
you still want God to bless, but part of it is having faith that if you take time off, he's still going to take care of you.
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's it's just like um, offerings. You know, the
That's right.
idea of tithes and offerings. It's like, okay, but if I give this to you, then I'm left with less, and something might come up. And I think that's where, the rubber meets the road. And I think for Sabbath, it's the same thing. It's like, well, how am I going to get all the things done if I have a whole day that I don't do those things, or whatever? And I think it very much is a faith issue, um, a lot of times.
Yeah, because sometimes legitimate emergency or valid ministry work will present itself at a time when you've scheduled yourself to not work
Yeah.
in order to rest and to recoup with God.
Mhm.
And the question is, who will take care of it,
Mhm.
right? And the answer is, of course, God will take care of it.
Right.
He'll just use someone else to do it. Or it will just have to wait. And in the process of waiting, uh, lots of other beautiful things happen that you may not have thought about.
Right. Or would not have happened if you just jumped in you know, and fixed it.
That's awesome. So just switching subjects a little bit, I know you mentioned the topic of reconciliation. So I just wanted to know, like, right now with all the challenges that the world is facing, and definitely disciples are facing, definitely from COVID, but I guess more specifically from the racial tension that's going on. What are you doing specifically to kind of help your church navigate through that aspect? Continually focused on God, but still addressing the injustice in society. Uh, well, I guess in our hearts, I should say, more specifically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great question, timely question. I think first, a confession. I hadn't done enough um, for a number of years to really even prepare the church for a moment like this. Had focused on a lot of important things or good
Sure.
things, but because the urgent feeling that certainly exists today, I think the urgency of this matter is so palpable now, um, that you can't avoid talking about it. And if you love the church that you're a part of, if you love your fellowship as a family,
Yeah.
you want to help them.
Yeah.
You want to help them understand it and see it. So what we've spent much more time doing lately, and I think in some ways being on somewhat of a quarantine has helped a little bit.
Yeah.
We're not running at the same pace we had before, and necessarily conducting business the way we had done it before. So now is as great a time as any. The docket has been cleared
Yeah.
to really try to teach the church how to respect one another, trust one another, love one another. We certainly, it's probably the same in the congregation that you're a part of, we have differing opinions in our fellowship. Some who scarcely believe that institutionalized racism is real, others who believe that it is so pervasive and so heavy that we cannot take another step forward until it's dismantled. And they're both in the same family.
Correct.
Right? And they're both in the same fellowship. So what we spent time doing last Sunday, really a lot of Sundays lately, but also in our midweeks, in times of prayer that we've organized with one another, is trying to teach each other how to listen and how to disagree with love and respect,
That's
right?
awesome.
And when you can find agreement, and when you come to a conversation or a dialogue with an open heart wanting to learn,
Yes.
careful, you might just learn something.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come to a dialogue already prepared with what you know and shut off to the possibility of growing and are just trying to get your point across to teach someone else, you have to be prepared for that too.
Right.
That will be an unfruitful time. So we're just trying to help people change their posture or grow more in their humility and love and respect and trust for each other. And I'm really proud of our church here, proud of our fellowship. And then maybe you want to talk about the squad that we've developed, or you want to say something else?
No, you can go ahead and talk about
Yeah.
the squad. You're on a roll.
So social, cultural unity and diversity squad. Each of our congregations in the International Churches of Christ is being encouraged to develop a squad for your congregation.
Yeah.
I would imagine it'll take a little bit longer for larger congregations than it will for smaller ones like ours. We have a smaller boat to turn.
Yeah.
But we've developed a group who's going to keep eyes on diversity and unity despite cultural differences in the church. And they're going to be watching out for things that we do that, whether we knew it or not, are red flags that make people feel that their culture is not honored or welcome. Looking for opportunities for our church to do more diverse things, whether it's out in the community or with one another, to celebrate our diversity.
Right.
So that's something else that we've spent time on. And then we have the benefit being readers, and then I was a history teacher before I went in the ministry. Just have some more basic knowledge of
Good deal.
the American experience regarding race and injustice.
Right.
And so I've just taken more time to try and teach. And our congregation benefits pretty greatly from the fact that the couple that led the church before we came here to lead the church, that was Michael and Micretia Burns. They led this congregation. So we weren't exactly working with people who hadn't heard some of these concepts before.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, it started with making sure that I really understood on a personal level as a disciple what it meant to be an ally to people of color, not just in our congregation, but the friends, spiritual family that we have all over. And so for me, that started with, I just need to not draw at this point from anything that I think I know, and I need to educate myself. And so at that point, I set to just seeking to understand, having a lot of conversations. I am always forever indebted to the brothers and sisters of color that I've been able to just have very frank conversations with, that even in their exhaustion, even in their their weary spirits are willing to break things down and help me to understand, one, so that I can be a great ally, but two, that I can take that into the fellowship and teach others how to be powerful allies to their brothers and sisters. And so I think that was really where the work started for me. And I mean, I think, in regards to this, in regards to anything as a disciple, if you get to a place where you're like, I don't know, I'm good, I got it figured out, then you probably don't.
You know you're in trouble.
And so for me, I just feel like it's just an ongoing education. And so having us kind of in shutdown or slow down mode has definitely it's definitely helped pace out how much I'm able to study, how much I'm able to get in scripture about it, how many books I'm able to consume.
How much time we can take in conversation trying to help people sort things out. And that's been a lot of time.
That's been a lot of time. It's been a lot of Zoom conversations and Facebook conversations and telephone calls and just listening to, folks who are just starting to understand things. And on the other end of the spectrum, very dear friends that are deeply wounded by racism and injustice that need to be heard when they don't feel like they're being heard, maybe even in their own congregations. And so it's kept us pretty busy. So that's kind of where I started for me, is just let me just check myself first and stay in learner mode so that I can continue to teach the fellowship.
I know we're friends on Facebook, and I definitely sense that with the conversations that you have with individuals, especially on our main, ICOC page. But just your gentleness too, how you come across to like, okay, let's talk about that. And I think that is definitely going to help all of us to keep having that kind of a spirit. So a lot of heavy stuff right here, but with all the challenges, you got to have fun. So I want to know, obviously you get time on Saturdays as part of your Sabbath, but what are some of the things you do? I think you mentioned walking by the park and getting, just deciding, just whatever you want to do, so to speak. What are some of the specific things that you can share that have helped you to kind of unplug and just have fun?
Yeah. I'm a big sports fan. So if there's football or basketball or baseball to play or to watch, I would love to be involved.
That's his jam.
That's what I like. The early part of the semi-quarantine that we went through was difficult because that's when I knew the pandemic was real. They canceled sports.
Honey, they canceled all sports. His eyes big as saucers.
So I did spin my wheels there for a little while, but that's the easy, low-hanging fruit for me is sports.
Yeah.
But together, especially since we moved here back to Wisconsin, it's a beautiful place.
Oh, it's
and so
beautiful.
We've learned to just do things outside, especially in the summer months.
Oh yeah.
This is, I've had the privilege of traveling around the world quite a bit. You just won't get much better than the Midwest in the summertime. It's lush. And so we kayak. We live not too far away from a state park. She loves to hammock.
I hammock.
Got hammocks.
I know. I've seen a few pictures. Yeah, you guys hammocking.
I hammock the mess out of my life. That's where I find my rest. Yeah.
And we
That's
hike
awesome.
and just try to enjoy outside, especially while it's warm.
Right.
Yeah, they say the outdoors is very healthy for you to get out. Even in winter, some people say that it just does something to the mind, and the soul. So
I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I know you also do art, Ivy.
I do, yes. I do a fair amount of art. I'm grateful that Damon is so very gracious with all of my just supplies and projects and He's great. Because I'm always coming up with a new idea. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do this. And he's like, okay. You know, he just knows this area right here is going to be consumed by that for a time. And, so, that goes, it's everything from crafting to now I started sewing to my passion for painting and watercolor.
She goes through phases.
I do. I do go through phases, and then I'll go, oh, I remember that, and then I'll skip back. It's like tick 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 tick. It's like rotating books. I rotate crafts, but I'd say my mainstay is photography. Having my my own business on the side that I can kind of take, different jobs from time to time. Like I had a senior shoot today. To me, that's very cathartic. Like it never feels like work. It just feels like being able to. It feels like a ministry, and it sounds really weird, but no matter what kind of shoot it is, even if I'm out on my own, the ability to stop time, it's like a superpower. And if you're with a person, to be able to help that person to see their own beauty, because I think a lot of times we're very critical about how we look in pictures, or I'm better behind the camera. I mean, I've said that like a bazillion times, but it just can't be underestimated, the power of a photo and what that means, maybe not even just to you, but to your family, or and so I'd say probably photography and painting are my two big ones, though.
I think I wonder if that's a spiritual issue where you're trying to find beauty in things, and then when you look at that in terms of the church and the fact that we're image bearers, that you're really trying to help people see like they're made in the image of God. I think there's probably a connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question. You can answer this however you want, which is, can you share about some of your favorite books? They can either be on, I know you obviously have, you were a history teacher. If there's some books like, man, this is just an awesome book, or if there's some of the more recent challenges, or just, whatever. What are some of your favorite books?
Yeah. Well, from a historical perspective, Let the Trumpet Sound is about, it's a biography about Martin Luther King. Same author, Stephen Oates, I believe is his name, wrote With Malice Toward None. It's a biography about Abraham Lincoln. Those books were so good that when I finished them, I actually felt like I missed Abraham Lincoln. Like I'm gonna miss spending time with him, where I miss Martin Luther King. I'm gonna miss the time. They were that good. So I was sad when they were over. Like a friend.
To a book club.
Yeah, like a friend was moving away. Spiritually, boy, I would say the most profound book that I've read outside of the Bible is this tiny little
Are you going to go there?
Called The Calvary Road.
Calvary Road.
Yeah.
Hands down.
And it's written by Roy Hessian. I think it was written back in the 50s or the 60s.
Yeah, late 50s.
It is an entire book about humility. And about the cross of Jesus, and how if we take an honest look at the cross of Jesus, there is no way to feel proud. There's not in the self-denigrating, for the sake of self-denigrating, but no way to feel proud. In other words, like I'm better than this circumstance, I deserve more, or I'm better than that person. You can't feel that way if you've taken an honest look at the life of Christ and his road to Calvary. Profoundly impacting. When I was a really young Christian, I read a lot of Max Lucado. He's got these really short sentences.
He does.
Style of writing, but it's very heartsy. Those were good.
Yeah.
But most recently, really enjoyed Forgotten God by Francis Chan, a book about the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
and
so good.
The utter lack sometimes in many churches of maybe for fear of not wanting to be weird, we don't even talk about the Holy Spirit. We don't leave much room for the Spirit. But there's no way to look at the early church in the book of Acts and not see the Spirit playing a prominent part in
Just call it Acts of the Spirit, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look into the Calvary Road one because I think like even our current situation, I know you've been doing different lessons on, just really helping people to be more spiritual. I think that to me, like, how can you have like not how can you not see people as image bearers when you have a Calvary Road mindset? That's
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'd say top of the list outside of the Bible is definitely Calvary Road. And it's a book that, from the first time I read it, I've probably read it every year since then.
hmm,
Because it's just a heart check. It's just a continual, it's just a small little book, but it's like the book of James. After you read the book of James, you feel like you've been punched in the face 50 times. And you're like, I need an ice pack.
But in a nice way.
But in a very nice way, yes. That is Roy Hession's book. And I will say it's public domain.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
you can actually just Google Roy Hession Calvary Road PDF, and you can download it as a PDF. If you have got Kindle, then you can email it to your Kindle address, and it'll pull right up onto your Kindle, and you can read it online. But hands down, probably the most powerful book that I've read outside of Scripture. And I think that the beautiful thing about that book is that he draws from, I know, just his experience as a missionary as well. Um, and you just know this guy is just a deeply humble person. Um, so aside from that book, I would say another book, which is just kind of a Christian classic, is Hind's Feet on High Places by Hannah Hurnard. And it's all allegorical, but possibly just the most beautiful expression of the love of God, how he pursues us, how he places his love in our hearts, how he allows suffering and trials to for us to be changed and transformed, to be able to go up to the mountaintops and to be with him. And so Hind's Feet on High Places, I think, was also highly transformational for me. As a baby Christian, there was a book that I read that's no longer in print, but it's called The Anatomy of Calvary. And I think as a baby Christian, I was like maybe a week old when I read that book. And I've read that book probably 7 or 8 times. And it just breaks down the entire, from the night Jesus was arrested all the way to his resurrection, from literal historical and archaeological findings of what does it mean to be flogged, what does it mean. And I think it was a book that, in the 80s, and specifically a lot of disciples were aware of, because I think like even in the front there are some disciples that are mentioned. So I don't know if it wasn't necessarily, we didn't have DPI at that point or whatever, but it was profoundly impacting, and I think just helped me to stay close to the cross when I understood, really, like the title of the book, the anatomy of it. What was the cost of it, really?
Mhm. I know you've read some books more recently on some of the injustices in society. Can you share, 3 titles or so that have impacted you?
Yes. Wow. There's a stack running through my head right
New
now.
Jim Crow.
Oh yeah, New Jim Crow. Absolutely powerful book, because I think the author does an incredible job of kind of building this discourse. You can see throughout history, from the Jim Crow era to the war on drugs, and then into mass incarceration, how really Jim Crow was not abolished as much as it was
Altered.
reformed and altered and called a different name.
Right.
and it accomplishes the same thing. And so I think that book has been an eye opener. I think books that have been very challenging just to pick up because of their titles.
White Fragility.
White Fragility. um, but I'm not
I don't
kidding.
like this book, and I haven't even read it yet.
Fragile in my whiteness.
I don't appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but to me, I feel like the visceral response that started to raise up in my heart just toward the title of it, I think was proof that I needed to read this book. And so I read.
It was excellent marketing. That was excellent marketing.
So good.
Psychologist.
Yes, so good. And then another book that is really more spiritual based in the sense of using scripture and using the idea of seeking justice and loving mercy was a book called Be the Bridge. And there's also a corresponding Facebook group if you use the YouVersion app of the Bible. There's also a reading plan on there for Be the Bridge, and it's not for the faint-hearted, not one bit. I mean, it's absolutely. She has questions after every chapter that you can't read and go, well, I'll just skip to the next chapter. I mean, you read through them and you're like, oh, I mean, those questions demand an answer from me. And so those have been very, very convicting. It's really one of the best books that I've read.
Amen. Well, thanks so much for your time. I definitely appreciate everything you've shared. I think the biggest takeaway that I have from what you've shared is humility. And I think the book that you both referenced, Calvary Road, I think is a testament to your desire to be humble. And I think it shows itself in trying to obviously, listen as much as you can to the different gyrations that our world is going through, and also share those, with your congregation. I think there's no way we're going to get through all of our challenges as individual, disciples or churches without, imitating your example, of humility. And I'm glad you have just some great fun times. I definitely need to imitate that Sabbath that you mentioned, to just take, that one day off and just, buy me a hammock.
Send me your address. I got one to send you.
She does.
Yeah.
She's got hammocks for all of us.
Oh, good deal, good deal. Well, this almost seems like a Zoom date or something like that. So it's definitely been fun. We definitely will keep communicating. Those of you that did watch this episode, if you enjoyed it, please click a like and definitely consider subscribing for more great episodes. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.